Howdy Cal folks, Mr. Norman here. We're on to 1.2, identifying parent functions and transformations. So the most important thing for you to do right now at the beginning of this video is to write down this paragraph, identifying function families, the whole thing, as well as the core concept. You're going to need all that information to be successful inside of this section. So you can obviously pause the video or go to your online textbook if you need a better look at it. I'm having a slight technical difficulty, but it'll be fine. So make sure you copy all of that information, the whole box. Okay, so now that you've paused and copied that down, we're going to cover the names of it. So constant. Why is it called a constant? It goes sideways. The number is always the same. The parent function is y equals 1, or f of x equals 1. So it's always 1 the whole way across. The next one is linear. Linear means line. You've been looking at these your entire high school career and maybe even half of your junior high one as well. Absolute value. Those bars mean absolute value. It means the number, whatever number you have inside, the answer has to be positive. So the absolute value of -1 is 1. Absolute value represents your distance from 0. So that's why, picture this as a line, this would go down. See here? But since the x value has to be positive, it gets bent up here. So you can remember the v in absolute value v. And then we have the quadratic, probably the second most familiar thing you've seen. Y equals x squared. So for every x, you multiply by itself. And here you go. And squares are never negative. The next thing we have is domain. Domain, in case you don't remember, domain is the set of all x values. Domain will almost always be all real numbers. When we're dealing with parent functions of this scope, you see they're always all real numbers. The next one we have is range. Domain is the set of all x values. Range is the set of all y values. Make sure you get that noted. It's going to be very important later. So range here, remember earlier I said for the constant function, the answer is always the same. So the range will equal, no inequality, it will equal whatever number touches the y-axis. We also call that our y-intercept. Y-intercept, where it touches the y-axis. It touches the y-axis at 1, so the range is y equals 1. Next we have linear. As you can see, it goes all the way up, down, up, and down. All real numbers. It covers everything. Absolute value. Oh look, it's an inequality. We just covered these. Hopefully this is familiar. If not, send me a message. Y is greater than or equal to 0. So y, we see this point, the dot, is at, it is the y-intercept at 0, and it goes up from there. There are no points in this graph that are below it. So to show an example, here's our v. If we were to shade it in for what all the y values can be, it only goes up. There are no values below it that work. So it's all the y values that are above it. So y is greater than 0. The parabola works the exact same way. Wherever this tip is, everything inside of the arrows, that's what's included. Shading, it only goes up. So if we look at our first example, it says identifying a function family. That simply means when we see a shape, we have to know what the parent function is. So it's pretty simple. Simple to see, not so simple to draw. I have terrible handwriting, as you've noticed by now. So here's our coordinate plane. So this function, draw it here. It's completely flat. It doesn't go up or down. It only has one y value. So what's the parent function going to be? Yes, constant. So y equals 1 is the parent function. So look at this one. You see that we're looking down, but what is it? A V, it has a point. It looks sort of like an A. So when it has a V, it's absolute value. That V is super important. And the parent function is y equals the absolute value, that's what these bars mean, of x, and that's the parent. So here's another graph. And what do we have here? Well, that's our good old friend, the line. That's y equals x. Oh, I didn't know I could write out there. It's y equals x, or linear. And if you've been counting or pay attention, we have one left. That is a parabola. That's the shape. The parent function is y equals x squared. It's also a quadratic. So whatever the shape is, that's going to tell you what the parent function is in name as well as symbol. So next we're going to describe transformations. And upon second looking, I think we're going to cut the video off here, and I'll start the next video on with describing transformations, because describing transformations will be a little thick. So a quick review. We've talked about the parent function. We have 4 that we're going to be looking at right now. The constant, which is flat, the linear, which goes diagonal, the absolute value, which is a V, and the quadratic, which is a U shape, it's a parabola. We talked about domain, which is all the real numbers for all of these. Domain is all the x values. We talked about range. For the constant, it's y equals 1. For the linear, it's all real numbers. For the absolute value, it's y is greater than or equal to 0. We're going to be looking at whatever's inside of the arrows as we go up. Same thing for the parabola. We're going to be looking inside of the arrows. We also covered that we can look at the general shape of a graph to identify the parent function. Okay? You will see me soon at the next video. Cal folks out. Peace.